A simple act of kindness turned into a fight for dignity and respect. At an airport, a soldier volunteers to help a veteran, but the airline staff refuses. What follows will leave you speechless. The soldier stands firm, but it's not until the passengers witness this injustice that the tide starts to turn. Will they stand by or speak up? Stick around to find out. Before we continue, comment where you're watching from and subscribe for more powerful stories. It was a normal day at the airport, bustling with travelers rushing to their gates. Among them, a disabled veteran struggling with his mobility sat quietly near the check-in counter. His hands trembled slightly, his uniform worn and faded, showing the signs of years of service. He had done his part for the country, but now he found himself dependent on others for simple tasks. Nearby, a soldier, young, tall, with a pride in his step, noticed the veteran. Without hesitation, he approached the staff and offered to help escort the man to his gate. The soldier, confident in his mission, knew exactly what needed to be done. But instead of receiving a grateful response, he was met with a cold, impassive face from the airline staff. "Sorry, but that's against policy," one of the attendants said, shaking her head. The soldier was confused. "But I'm just trying to help," he explained. Yet the rules were the rules, and the staff refused to allow it. What seemed like a simple act of kindness was turned down in an instant, and the soldier was left standing there, frustrated. Around them, people started noticing the situation, their eyes shifting between the soldier, the veteran, and the staff. Little did they know, things were about to take a dramatic turn. The airport was buzzing with travelers, but something felt off. Jamal, a soldier in his mid-20s, stood by a disabled veteran at the check-in counter. The man had served his country, but now he was struggling to move. Jamal, eager to help, stepped forward and offered to escort the veteran to his gate. He knew the man needed assistance, but when he approached the airline staff, the response he received was unexpected. "Sorry, but that's against policy," the attendant said with a dismissive wave. Jamal was taken aback. "I'm just trying to help him," he insisted, pointing to the veteran, who was visibly uncomfortable. "We understand, but it's against the rules," the staff member said coldly, offering no further explanation. Jamal felt a surge of frustration, but he didn't give up. "He served his country. I'm just trying to assist him with basic needs," he said firmly, still standing there, hoping for a reasonable response. But the staff refused. "We're sorry, but that's how it works," she repeated. Jamal's heart sank. He looked at the veteran, who shrugged helplessly, his eyes full of resignation. But Jamal couldn't just walk away. He felt this was wrong, so wrong. Nearby, passengers overheard the exchange, their eyes flicking from Jamal to the staff. One woman standing in line took a step forward. "Excuse me," she called out, her voice sharp. "Why can't he help him? What's the issue?" The attendant looked startled but quickly replied, "It's policy. We can't let him do that." The veteran shifted uncomfortably, clearly embarrassed. Jamal was starting to lose patience, but the rising murmurs from the crowd showed that others felt the same way. "What kind of policy is this?" the older man next to Jamal asked, his voice rising. "A soldier can't help a veteran?" That was the tipping point. More passengers started to gather around, all asking the same question. Why? One more person spoke up. "This is outrageous. Why are we letting a rule stop someone from doing what's right?" The atmosphere in the airport shifted. People who had been minding their own business now found themselves involved in this unexpected injustice. The crowd was growing, and so was the tension. Jamal looked at the staff and then back at the veteran. The moment was becoming electric, the pressure mounting. He wasn't just a soldier trying to help anymore. He was becoming the symbol of something bigger. The staff tried to hold their ground, but the voices around them grew louder. "Let him help!" one man yelled from the back of the crowd. More people nodded, their faces filled with determination. A few passengers began recording the scene on their phones, capturing what was unfolding. Jamal turned back to the staff. "It's clear we can't stand by and let this happen," he said. "If you won't help him, we will." The staff member glanced at her colleagues, who were growing increasingly uncomfortable. What had seemed like a simple policy now felt foolish. People were standing up for what was right, and that's when the realization hit. Jamal wasn't alone anymore. The veteran wasn't alone anymore. The power of the crowd, The collective voice of the passengers was impossible to ignore. The staff now faced a decision: stand firm on a pointless policy or acknowledge the overwhelming call for justice. It was a decision that could define not just their day, but their integrity. The room fell silent for a brief moment. Jamal, standing tall, felt every second of that silence. Then from the back of the crowd, someone spoke up. "Let the soldier help the man. It's the right thing to do." That was all it took. The staff member, now clearly outnumbered, looked around and sighed. "Okay, fine," she said almost reluctantly. "He can assist." Jamal nodded, relieved. But the fight wasn't over yet. This moment, this small victory, was just the beginning. The passengers had spoken, but the bigger question was, would the airline take a deeper look at its policies? Jamal didn't know the answer yet, but the collective force of people standing up for what's right had just shown its power. The tension in the air was thick. Jamal, standing tall, watched the veteran's frustration grow as the staff continued to refuse help. The veteran had fought for this country, but now in his time of need, the system was failing him. "I'm just trying to help," Jamal said, his voice firm but calm. He wasn't backing down. He's a veteran. He deserves more than this. The staff remained unmoved. "It's against policy," the attendant repeated, her tone cold. Jamal clenched his fists, trying to stay composed. He knew he wasn't the only one feeling the injustice of the situation. The crowd, once quiet, was starting to stir. The whispers grew louder as passengers exchanged looks. Jamal glanced around. People were watching now. They weren't just bystanders anymore. One woman, clearly fed up, stepped forward. "Why can't he help him?" she asked, her voice sharp. The attendant's eyes flickered to her, but she didn't answer. "You're telling me that a soldier can't help a disabled veteran?" Another passenger asked, incredulity in his voice. The tension escalated as more passengers joined in. "This is ridiculous," one man muttered. "You're going to let policy get in the way of helping a veteran?" Jamal turned back to the veteran. The man's eyes were tired, his hands shaking slightly as he tried to maintain composure. Jamal's heart ached for him. This wasn't just about policy. It was about human decency. And right now, that was being ignored. "Please, just let him help me," the veteran said softly, his voice barely audible over the growing voices of the crowd. Jamal stood firm. He wasn't just going to walk away. "If you can't help him, I will," he said, looking directly at the staff. A few more passengers stepped forward, their voices rising in unison. "Let him help," one woman said, her voice full of conviction. Another person joined in. "This is wrong. A soldier can't help a disabled veteran? What kind of policy is that?" The atmosphere in the airport had completely shifted. What started as a small interaction had now turned into a public display of support for what was right. More and more voices were joining in, creating a powerful collective demand. Jamal wasn't alone. The veteran wasn't alone. The passengers were taking a stand. "You don't get it," the staff member snapped, clearly overwhelmed. "It's just policy." "No," Jamal responded, cutting her off. "It's not. It's a matter of doing what's right." The staff member hesitated, glancing nervously at her colleagues. The other passengers were now fully invested in this confrontation, their support undeniable. "Look," Jamal said, his voice calm but strong, "we're not asking you to break any rules. We're asking you to see the human being in front of you. This man needs help, and I'm offering it." At this moment, the noise in the terminal was deafening. More and more people were voicing their disapproval of the airline's refusal to let the soldier assist the veteran. The staff was beginning to realize the weight of the situation. They weren't just dealing with a single passenger's request. They were facing a wave of passengers who believed in the right thing. Finally, after a long, uncomfortable pause, the senior staff member who had been standing silently stepped forward. "Fine," she said, her voice low. "Let him help." Relief washed over Jamal. The veteran's face lit up, his shoulders relaxed, and the weight of the situation seemed to lift. "Thank you," the veteran said softly, his voice full of gratitude. Jamal nodded, smiling slightly, but the applause from the crowd drowned out any other sounds. The moment was a victory, not just for the soldier and the veteran, but for everyone who took a stand. Jamal turned to the veteran, helping him up from the seat. As he did, he realized the power of standing up for what's right. This moment had become a symbol, A reminder that even when systems fail, people have the power to make a change. As the applause for the staff's reluctant concession died down, the tension in the terminal didn't fully dissipate. Passengers exchanged looks, their voices still murmuring. But there was something more. They had stood up for the right thing, but they weren't done yet. There was an underlying sense that this wasn't just about one moment of standing up. It was about something much bigger. Jamal, with the veteran now by his side, started walking toward the gate. The veteran leaned on him slightly, grateful, but still uneasy. The ordeal had left him feeling small, almost invisible in the very place that was supposed to be welcoming. Jamal could sense his discomfort, but the moment had passed, or so they thought. As they reached the gate, a senior airline official approached them. He had been quietly observing the scene, and now his presence made Jamal uneasy. The crowd had settled down, and most passengers had gone back to their own business. But the air felt heavy. It wasn't over. Not yet. "I need to speak with you," the official said, addressing Jamal. Jamal stopped, surprised. He had hoped the situation had been resolved, but now it felt like another challenge was coming. "What's this about?" he asked, already sensing where this was going. "I understand the situation was handled earlier," the official began, but his tone didn't match his words. "But I think you need to understand something." Jamal stood still. Was this really happening? After all that had transpired, were they really going to try to make him feel guilty? "We don't usually make exceptions for these things, the official continued, his voice still polite but firm. "But we had no choice today. Let me be clear, this is not a policy I support." Jamal's heart sank. It was clear now. The staff hadn't been the only ones enforcing that restrictive policy. The official was part of the system, one that continued to put rules above people's rights. "You're saying this is a one-time exception?" Jamal asked, his frustration simmering beneath his calm exterior. The official nodded. "Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying." That's when Jamal felt a flicker of doubt. A simple act of kindness had turned into a battle for respect, and the only victory seemed to be a temporary one. What did this say about how the system treated veterans, disabled or not? How many more stories like this were hidden behind policies that dehumanize people? "You shouldn't have had to make an exception," Jamal said firmly, his voice growing louder. "This should be the standard. Veterans deserve better?" The official shifted uncomfortably. It was clear that he wasn't expecting a confrontation, but Jamal wasn't about to back down. The veteran, still leaning on Jamal for support, spoke up. His voice was quiet but carried the weight of a lifetime of service. "This wasn't about making an exception," he said, his words slow but full of emotion. "This was about doing what's right. No policy should ever come before people's dignity." The crowd, still lingering near the gate, began to take notice again. Heads turned. Jamal wasn't just speaking for himself anymore. The veteran wasn't just asking for help anymore. The passengers were now listening, feeling the intensity of the moment once again. The official's face hardened, and Jamal could see his discomfort growing. "We're trying to follow the rules," he said, his voice now defensive. "But I suppose we can talk about this another time." Jamal shook his head. "Number. The time is now. This isn't just about following rules, it's about standing for something bigger than that." As Jamal spoke, the crowd began to stir once again. Some people moved closer. Others held their phones up, capturing the moment. It was becoming clear that this moment was more than just an argument. It was a movement. A small fight for the right thing that had grown into something that couldn't be ignored. The veteran looked up at the official. "I don't want your apology. I want a change in the way you treat veterans like me. It's long overdue." The official's face tightened, but it was clear that the conversation was over. He knew he had lost. The passengers who had supported Jamal had spoken their truth, and now it was undeniable. Jamal turned away, the veteran by his side. As they walked toward the gate, he couldn't help but feel the power of what had just happened. A small act of kindness had turned into a larger confrontation. But that moment, that realization, had changed something. The passengers had been willing to stand up, not for a single soldier or a single veteran, but for something bigger. And that was the moment the system started to shift. The ordeal had come to an end, but Jamal couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted in the room. The veteran, though exhausted, gave him a grateful nod as they reached the gate. The weight of the struggle was still fresh in Jamal's mind. But it wasn't just about the airline anymore. It wasn't even about the rules. It was about respect, about dignity. Jamal turned to look at the other passengers. Their support had been overwhelming, but they didn't just stand there because they thought it was the right thing to do. They stood because they could all see it. That one simple act of standing up for someone in need had made a difference. But it wasn't over yet. "Thank you," the veteran whispered again, his voice rough. "You've made this trip bearable. I thought I'd be invisible, but you proved me wrong." Jamal smiled, trying to push down the tightness in his chest. "No one should ever feel invisible," he replied. But as they made their way through the terminal, Jamal couldn't stop thinking about the bigger picture. The way a simple policy had almost overshadowed human compassion. The way it took an entire crowd to challenge a simple request. Why did it take a group of strangers to make this moment happen? Why didn't the airline just do the right thing in the first place? It was a question he knew wouldn't be answered easily, but he also realized that the fight wasn't over. It never was. The victory they'd won today wasn't just about the veteran or even Jamal's act of kindness. It was about something deeper. It was about showing the world that when something isn't right, it's okay to speak up. It's okay to question the system and demand accountability. People were willing to stand up because they believed in fairness, in justice, and in doing what was right, no matter how difficult the fight. Jamal's thoughts drifted as they reached the plane. It was just a moment in time, but to the veteran, it would be a memory he'd carry with him. To the passengers who had supported Jamal, it was a reminder that collective action could make a difference. But for Jamal, it was a realization that change didn't happen from the top down. It happened when people, ordinary people, took a stand. As the veteran was helped into his seat, Jamal made a quiet promise to himself. The system had its flaws, but this moment, this small act of standing up, had sparked something inside him. It was a ripple. It was a shift in perspective. The passengers who had come together for this cause were more than just bystanders. They were now part of something bigger. They had collectively reminded the airline and the world that human decency should always come first, even when rules and policies get in the way. Jamal took a seat next to the veteran, his mind buzzing with the implications of what had just happened. This was more than just a small victory at an airport. It was a reflection of something that could change society as a whole. A society that could stand together, not just when it was convenient, but when it truly mattered. The door of the plane closed, and as the engine roared to life, Jamal felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The journey wasn't over, not by a long shot, but today they had taken a step in the right direction. As the plane took off, Jamal looked out the window, his mind racing with everything that had just happened. The quiet buzz of the cabin seemed to echo in his ears, but the memory of the crowded terminal and the voices of those who had spoken up for the veteran stayed with him. It wasn't just about helping one person. It was about all the passengers who took a stand for what was right. The ripple effect of this simple act of kindness had turned into something much bigger. He thought about what had happened, how a small group of people, united by a sense of justice, had been able to change the course of that day. It wasn't just a victory for the soldier or the veteran. It was a victory for everyone who had the courage to speak up, even when the system seemed stacked against them. Jamal knew that this wasn't a one-time moment. It was a reminder that sometimes the power to make a change is right in front of us. We just need to recognize it and take action. Now, as the plane soared through the clouds, Jamal felt the weight of the responsibility that came with that kind of change. It was a reminder that the fight for justice doesn't stop at the airport gates. It's a battle that continues every day, in small acts, in big moments, and in the courage to do what's right. What about you? Have you ever been in a situation where you had to take a stand? Maybe you witnessed something that felt wrong, or you were faced with a difficult decision. If you did, what did you do? Share your thoughts below. I'd love to hear your story. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories that remind us to never stop fighting for justice.